And good evening, everyone, to the Sturt Football Club Grand Final edition of the Weekend Wrap. We might have some Crows stuff to talk about in a little while, but I've managed to turn up showing more heart than all the AFL-listed Port Adelaide players that played against a bunch of SANFL part-timers today. And joining me, as usual, is Macca and Nikki. How you going, guys?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate.
I would like to say thank you to Mr. Port Adelaide on the Big Footy board, who came over to the Adelaide board at the start of the week and put in his little trifecta that he was going to be so happy about was going to happen, which was Ken Hinkley was going to be gone as coach of Port Adelaide, the Crows were going to lose, and Port were going to win the SANFL Grand Final. God, I hope he's tipping Richmond.
Was that the biggest fail of all time? Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone fail so hard as that guy. That was amazing.
Well, we actually kind of liked him because we agreed with him that Hinkley wasn't really that good and, you know, would actually be of benefit for him to go, as we talked about on Tuesday. But, well, well done, mate.
I mean, he's got to be a late starter for the Cockwomble of the Century Awards, surely.
Well, he's got it right. You know, Kane, Cords and Treadray haven't been too bad. They've both gone... well, certainly Kane has. He's gone with against us in both games so far. And then he's got his comments in the Sunday Mail. He could never, ever want us to win the flag.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, look, let's get things underway. And I reckon we go from the most important game to the least important. So, first up, it was Sturt getting up by 1 point over the Port Adelaide Magpies, the AFL reserves, with I don't know how many AFL-listed players. And 7-8 to 7-7. Sturt were gone for all money. Even at half-time, we were shot to pieces, and so much heart in that second half just to defend against waves of Port Adelaide forward entries, and well-deserving win. You must admit, guys.
Well, I got my wish. I did say to Mrs. Macca that it was lovely the way that their A grade had lost in their final. And I thought it'd be magnificent if they lost this game by a point, and they did.
Well done, Macca.
That's fantastic.
Well, they had the legs, although there was one of their players. He actually kicked Archie. He kicked the goal whilst he was cramping.
He actually had a great last quarter. Archie, really good last quarter.
The issue there, they just made stupid bloody errors. Port did. They had the run. I think there was just the will and the system of Sturt was just so much better. Not helped. Oh, my God, the umpiring was putrid.
Yeah, I didn't actually...
No, both ways.
Yeah, I didn't actually notice it too much, to be honest.
Never, I never noticed it at all, Nikki, to be honest.
To do with the forward entry, so Beard got... Like, he would get one free, which was the easier-looking free, or like the softer kind of free. It was there, but it wasn't often that type of free gets let go. The other ones that were completely and utterly missed or holding the balls that weren't paid. But they give them a bit more opportunity in the SANFL.
Yeah, I don't actually mind the umpiring at all, to be honest.
And it was just in the forward arcs that there was some dodgy frees both ways.
Yeah, I do like the umpiring at that level, though, because they do, as Phoenix said, they don't give the soft frees. You got to earn them.
Just seemed a little bit more common sense the way the umpire, and there were no histrionics with the umpiring. You know, it's just a very professional, workmanlike effort by the umpires, and they don't, they're not mic'd up, and they don't have to wave their arms around like they're just going to take off or something like that. I didn't mind it, and I got to say, I mean, I've watched a reasonable amount of SANFL this season, and I really like the last possession rule for out of bounds, to be honest.
Yeah, that does work really well.
It does work well, and I've got to say...
And the 25-metre penalty is great.
And what does other people think? I just watching it today, I thought that if you compared the SAFL standard to when before Port Adelaide and Adelaide came into competition, I think it's risen.
I think my impression, Macca, is that the fitness levels have risen, but what that's led to is a far more contested game because players can make second and third efforts. So it's actually quite difficult to break free and get on the outside. And some of the second and third efforts by Sturt, or by both teams really, were pretty incredible. And for a SANFL team to be able to stand up against a team who does, basically train with an AFL list is pretty good going. But the skills are still not as... I mean, there was a few blokes, Michael Graham in the stand, mate, he's a cut above the blokes that were playing, even Kirkwood and that, he's a cut above those sort of players.
Okay, I just have to interrupt you because there was just the most epic cockwomble almost fail by Geelong Falcons co-captains at the toss at the TAC Cup Grand Final. They won the toss. One captain pointed one way and the other captain pointed the other. That's
funny. Anyway, So the Mighty Blues got up and that was awesome, and I've followed Sturt all my life, so I'm very, very happy. Back-to-back, I can't remember the last time we went back-to-back, probably in the late 60s, I reckon, Macca.
Well, it was a good game.
Yeah.
It was a good game to watch and the right result.
And 40,000.
Rumour is, 40,000, great number. And looking at the stands when I was around cleaning, just watching it on telly, it looked so good. And I reckon you could see a couple of Crows gear throughout
definitely.
the game, which was quite nice. And I had to go to Marion today at lunchtime, which was quite busy, and an awful lot of Crows gear and people buying Crows gear.
Bandwagoners.
Oh, yeah. No, they had Crows gear on. They were buying new stuff.
New stuff.
Yeah. Obviously for the trip.
Just to clarify what I meant about the stand, I meant the standing, say, compared to, say, 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think clubs have become more professional in general, but, it's a big ask for blokes who aren't playing professionally to put in that amount of work, week in, week out for, not huge returns. Anyway, so that was the SANFL Grand Final. Fantastic. I'll probably slot in the Sturt Club song whenever I damn well feel like it over the next week. And I make no apologies. Anyway, on to the real stuff. And what a fantastic weekend for us as Crow supporters as well. Adelaide smacking the Cats 136-75. Game pretty much done and dusted at quarter time. We basically withstood a bit of a second quarter push by Geelong, but we looked to have the game in control for pretty much the entire night, and we run out by 61 points. How'd you guys see it?
Well, the way I saw it was, and it's been said a lot, that this is a team that suffered a lot of adversity over the years, and I won't list it all off. But as everybody else out there knows, we've had deaths, we've had players leave, we've had suspensions and stripped of the draft picks, all those things. And yet we've managed to get a list together that at the moment is a pretty powerful list that's playing as a team and is favourite to win the grand final, whether it does or not. It would have to have an off day not to win it. And I say congratulations to the club. You've done a mighty, mighty job.
Just being there and that noise of the crowd, and I was actually sitting directly above the Geelong race. So there's actually only, I think, about 5 rows, and then you had 2 bays of Geelong supporters on the other side. And absolute credit to those Geelong supporters. I only had to wave goodbye partway through the last quarter. About 5 Geelong supporters that got up and left. The rest of them actually stayed till the end. And they were getting smacked.
That's because they couldn't afford accommodation, so they were driving back home that night.
No, but just for them to stay there to clap off Mackie and Lonergan, full credit to them. We had some, because we were sitting back row, so the standing area was directly behind us, and there was a couple of Geelong people there. They were pretty quiet every so often.
Yeah, but Nikki, to be honest, what Phoenix said is basically right. Oh, there's also the factor of the buses. A lot of them come by buses.
Oh yeah,
and they couldn't leave anyhow because the bus was no bus for them to get away. So it's something that would be genuine, but don't give them anything. You don't have to.
There was actually a few whispers that some of the Geelong coaching staff had to be called back to the change rooms after the game to actually farewell Mackie and Logan, and that included Chris Scott.
Marvellous if that was the case. You know, the guys that have busted their guts for the club for a very long time. And these two blokes, Lonergan and Mackie, would be very high up in a list of blokes who really play a bad game and really, well, Lonergan's history in the fact of, losing a kidney and keeping on going and risking his life basically by playing. But if that's true, Felix, that's an absolute disgrace and wouldn't surprise me actually being the fat-headed club that Geelong is.
Well, that was off the Geelong board. And I agree with you, Macca. They are a fat-headed club and they play like a bunch of entitled flogs, to be honest. And it starts with Chris Scott at the helm. I've never seen a coach wave his arms about for frees as much as Chris Scott. The players play for. I've noticed a couple of times on Friday night, like Scott Selwood, I remember the ball was kicked towards the boundary line and instead of chasing the ball, he was actually waving his arms about for a deliberate. The ball didn't even end up going out. I think there's an issue at that club, and not being close to it, it's hard to say, but from an external point of view or perspective, I think the issue at that club is a overblown sense of entitlement, really.
Yep, and taking it one step further, you take the Ablett situation. They believe they're entitled to have him back, even though he's under contract, even though they did get compensation for him leaving. And even though he voluntarily signed a contract to continue on and he's got 2 more years in his contract, they believe they're entitled to get him back. He's a Geelong boy.
Yeah.
And they think they should get him for pick 78 or something like that.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I think what it comes down to, Phoenix, is that era with Thompson, because and if you ever listened to Bomber Thompson speak, but like for AFL 360 when he's on, I actually mute that section. I'm not interested in listening to his arrogance. They did actually play as a team during that time, but there was always, and they were a good team, or very good team. And you had some players who did that sacrificial and team kind of part of it. But yeah, it's just kind of they've lost those players, or the ones that have come through and now in the leadership group are a bit more in terms of the arrogance as opposed to the team part of it. I think that's where it comes down to. And it's interesting that PJ Crow's in the chat, he said teams take on the personality of their coach.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Good point by PJ Crows. And then Chris Scott is a fat-headed individual. But one thing I'd say, I'm very, very proud of our club in the sense that Pikey's not a big-headed guy. He's happy to sort of sit out of the limelight. And he and his team have done a lot of good work with these boys. And they have created a great team in the sense that I'm not saying it's the best team in terms of skill that ever ran around, but they are bonded. They're bonded as a team. And the one thing we do know that win or lose, and I believe we will win in the grand final coming up, they will bust their guts to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Macca.
I liked because you had, so if anybody hasn't seen the 24 series, so there's 3 actual things up on YouTube with Tex. The last one's called Adversity. And he, in referring to grieving for Phil Walsh and how he doesn't grieve in public, he's done it in private. And his role was to, as he said, look after my little brothers. So that's our captain calling his players, they're his little brothers. It's a family. And then we found out this week that Pikey has put in place that there's groups of 8 to 10 and they have to look after each other. They're little care groups in a way.
Yeah, great idea that when I saw that.
And because it's still fairly recent what happened to our club with Bailey and with Walshy, that the grieving process doesn't stop. It goes on for your whole life. We've actually lost 2 players to the game. So a young one and an older statement. So in Sam Siggins and Brent Riley, because of what happened. Riley's was also there was a physical issue with that as well because he couldn't play because of his head. But there were some other issues as well, with the loss of Phil through that period, which I think impacted. And it just the care that our club shows, and another very interesting thing was I think it was before the GWS game, they had Craig Kelly on, and they were asking, of course, about Jake and everything else. But then he's actually doing something with Emma Barr, our player welfare manager. So him and Emma Barr are presenting and working with the AFL Players Association regarding setting up better welfare for players for life after football. And the fact that it's coming out of our club to do this, and the AFLPA is fully on board with it to bring it in to actually provide better care over the whole of the AFL. So we're not just interested in looking after our players, we're interested in looking after all the players.
Except on grand final day, Nikki, in which case we can't give a stuff. And look, I don't disagree with any of that, and I think all of that is poignant, and it forms part of the story that gets us to this point. But at the end of the day, we have a game to win, and all that backstory counts for little, and we have a game to win. Let's see how we went against Geelong, because it was a pretty awesome display by Adelaide. The head-to-head stats were pretty telling. We had 382 disposals to 349, 254 kicks to 128 handballs, nearly a 1-to-2 kick-to-handball ratio. Now, you two have been doing this with me all season. Have we ever had a 1-to-2 kick-to-handball ratio?
No, I don't think so.
So who says that Pikey can't change it up? As a consequence, we also had 135 marks to 81. They out-tackled us simply because they were chasing us all night. Hit-outs were pretty even, 39 to 41. I thought Sauce did pretty well against their two blokes. Geelong won the free kick count, which wasn't surprising considering Joel Selwood had a game-high 6 tackles, and I read a stat about his career free kicks. It's just astonishing.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't go into that now. Our disposals per scoring shot, I said on, I think, Thursday night with Scorpus that we needed to be in our sweet spot of, 12-odd disposals per scoring shot. We were at 12.32. Even with all that chipping around, we were still in that sweet spot of 12 disposals per scoring shot. It was fantastic. Our efficiency with ball in hand was fantastic. 42 clearances to 36. 34 rebound 50s to 27. 52 inside 50s to 49. So that suggests that Geelong did have their chances, but their forward entries seem to be far more haphazard than ours. And let's have a look a bit further. Contested posies, 141 to 139 our way. Uncontested, as you'd expect, 247 to 211. Effective disposals, we went at 75.9, so 76% disposal efficiency to their 68.5.
That's just ridiculous.
Which is not only a pointer to our skill level, but also our pressure at them as well to keep them under the 70% disposal efficiency number. They took more contested marks than us, 16 to 9, but we took more marks inside 50 because we're really pinpointing our entries. 42 to 36 clearances. Even though some of these stats are pretty close, they beat us in sound clearances. Joel Selwood at one point, I think it was in the third quarter, got a bit of a run on where he was just running into the hole that Sam was plopping it into. But around the grounds, our stoppage clearances 28 to 19 is where we really asserted ourselves there. And 5,723 metres gained to 4,929 just shows that we just simply worked a lot harder than they did.
Tom Lynch in the first quarter had something ridiculous like over 200 metres gained.
Yep.
Tom Lynch. It's just like, whoa. I mean, you don't understand, because you don't really notice him that much unless you really start to look. Because you notice he's running, but that's his actual disposal efficiency as well, and how much he was putting into it. It was just an outstanding game.
Well, he was hitting his passes, and he doesn't always do that. Sometimes he can be a little bit harebrained and miss his passes, but I don't think he turned one over that I can remember.
He had a good game with that, and I don't think a lot of people. I don't know across the league whether he's appreciated as much as he should be, because of the fact that there aren't too many players like him in the league. He plays this link-up role, but not many. I can't think of many other clubs that have got a player like him.
No, I don't think anybody does. The closest probably would be Revolt.
Yeah.
Like Nick Revolt. That it's that kind of, which no wonder he plays like that, because who was he fighting to try and actually get a game for when he was at the Saints? Was Nick Rewalt's spot.
Different kind of player, but Buddy Franklin does a lot of lead-up work for Sydney as well. The difference being that he's got a leg on him, so he can actually kick him from outside 50. But
he is the other one. Yep, you're right.
A very good link-up player.
But on that, what you were talking about before regarding our disposal efficiency and our marks, etc., it was so noticeable that we changed up the way we came out of defence, because we didn't have Brodie to do those long kicks. So every kick out was a short kick to the pocket, and it was either side, or if we had the opportunity, it was up the middle. But it was that shorter one, and then it's on the 45. We were making them spread. We were doing those short little hit-ups. Sam Jacobs and Matt Crouch just running to get into those nice little holes was brilliant to watch. And they worked so hard, the pair of them. And it broke Geelong. They couldn't intercept.
Well, he didn't change up Chris Scott, and that was the problem. I mean, it was quite obvious from early on that we weren't going to play into their usual tactic of dropping a couple back and us bombing it into them and having it bounce out. We were going to push up the ground with short passes and have our forward 50 entries from closer to the 50-metre arc, either going very deep or hitting up a short target. I reckon Scott made two very severe tactical errors. One was starting Danger at full forward at the beginning. They needed to get their hands on the ball at the start. They needed to assert their midfield authority at the start, and having Dangerfield up forward, I think, cost them any chance of momentum early in the game. And the second one, I think, was not putting blitzarves on Tommy Lynch at some point, or at least making someone accountable for Tommy Lynch, because in that first half, Tommy Lynch just went berserk in terms of running up and down that wing, and they were just ignoring him.
Do you know who they put blitzarves on?
It was Kolodashny, wasn't it? Oh, no, Kolodashny was on Lynch, sorry. Blitzarves was on Matt Crouch, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he was starting on the wing.
Yeah,
Often
so he was following him around the ground.
And then he would pick it up, like what we do with Knight on Selwood. They were doing the same with Blitzarves on Matt Crouch. You can't tag Matt Crouch.
No,
you just can't tag him.
Well, you can, but you've got to be playing inside mid. And Blitzarves, following him around on the outside is not going to actually curtail Matty's... the dangerous parts of his game. So I don't know what he was thinking.
And the other thing is, playing Danger up forward against us is the height of stupidity, because we played him up forward. We know how he plays. He practiced, he trained against all of those defenders. They know exactly how he plays and where he runs, because we know that no matter what Chris Scott says, Danger's going to do what Danger does, because Danger is not a team player.
But they were never going to get him one out anyway. It wasn't like it was against Sydney. We don't play that one-on-one defence. We play team defence. There's always someone coming over the back. And Rory Laird was one that came over all the time. Jake Kelly was another. It was a stupid ploy by Scott, and it showed, it worked against Sydney, so, I'll roll the dice again. Well, as I think Scorpus and I pointed out again on Thursday night, we're a completely different team to Sydney, and it showed a large degree of lack of imagination by Chris Scott.
Yeah, the one thing I want to mention when you're talking about Dangerfield, when he was up forward, I've got to take my hat off to my lobotomy mate. Hard to get. I thought he played a beauty, to be honest. I thought he was really, really good. And Kyle, I've said some horrible things about you this year, mate, but I want to say I'm sorry, and you did play a great game.
When Pikey came onto the ground at the end and we were lining up So we're lining up to clap off Mackie and Lonergan. Talia was at the front and he's just staring at Pikey and he's doing the little fist pump at him like, yeah, we got this. And Pikey made a beeline straight for Hartigan. He was the first player he wanted to go and hug.
It's great coaching in the sense of building up his ego and his confidence as well. But he's come a long, long way from when he first started, and with the about 99% likelihood that Lever will depart at the end of this year, it's more important than ever that we've got two established pillars in Hartigan and
Talia.
Yeah, I'm thinking who's going to take his place. I was thinking, Andy Otten possibly, or
no, Jode.
Tom
will come in.
I'm having trouble remember the boy
Keith.
that came. That's it, Keith. That was the name I was struggling for, Keith. But Hartigan and Talia, they're established. It's just that third one that we'll need next year.
I think we'll rotate it between Keith if they're both fit and can handle it, because Keith has still got because he's come from that different background, so there is a different aerobic capacity, and that's the same with Tom. Tom came from a basketball background, so we've had to work on his tank as well a bit differently. So they can play out games in the SNFL quite well, but there's a big step up to AFL.
Anyway, this is a Tuesday Night Live conversation, guys.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Come on, Macca.
Now back to the game again. Well, if we go through our players, I mean, there weren't too many that didn't play well, and unfortunately, I don't think Greenwood had a biggie, but it was an even team performance. And you've got to take the hat off Taser Seidman, for example. With Brody down, you'd say, well, we're going to struggle there. But no, Seidman stood up and he played a terrific role, I thought. And the same sort of dashes, long kicks, etc. And also hats off to McKay, who took the role at half back, and plenty of hits in the process of doing so as well.
But McKay also took some incredibly risky, beautiful bullet passes, which were very Smith-esque, and I loved that.
He's growing in confidence, D-Mac, and that pass to Tex, basically at 45 degrees that set up Charlie's fifth goal was beautiful, and it's nice to see D-Mac backing himself in and running on top of the ground. And he isn't Brodie Smith, but he's probably the closest that we've got under the circumstances, and his second half of this season is probably the best of his career. And for all his knockers, the bloke deserves to be in a grand final just for no other reason than perseverance.
Correct. And another one I want to say, hats off to Andy Otten, who, there were plenty of names suggested, and I was suggesting other names as well. But, I mean, Andy Otten was always probably the one likely to get it, and he didn't let us down either.
Well, I think you saw the reasoning because having Otten up forward made Henderson accountable.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
and it was exactly what we were thinking during the week, that we needed to make Henderson a bit more accountable. The other thing that we did really well in their back half was to stop Tui from kicking the ball. He looked all at sea because
he had to be manned up.
Yeah, well, we just got in front of him, so he had to handball.
He looked lost on occasions, didn't he?
Well, he did, and he's their outlet. And see, this is the difference between how we were coached, identifying the strengths in their setup, and Zach Tui distributing off halfback as one of them, compared to one of the strengths of our setup, which is Tommy Lynch, providing a link up. Well, we put in a plan to curtail Zach Tui, and it worked really well, whereas they let Tommy Lynch off the chain. So I thought we did really well in some of those key strategic moves, and Zach Tui, I think, was very pivotal in shutting down their transition, because they were very slow when they got the ball and not very clean as a consequence. Yeah,
and another thing this game showed is the flexibility of our coaching staff in the sense of the way they look at a game. The game plan for the day is adjusted to who the opponent is, and as you quite rightly pointed out at the beginning, Phoenix, we were doing a lot of short passes, but the only time we kicked long was basically when we've done short passes, and all of a sudden somebody's slipped in behind their man, then we go boom long. And
it's who did the long kicks. It's once we got it in the hands of Atkins or Seeds,
correct,
or
etc.
Tex.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, blokes that could kick long and accurately. Yeah, so you're quite right. And I thought a brilliant piece of coaching.
But
Well,
it's
I think,
also
sorry,
it's
go on,
also really well done by the players, because the work that McKay and Seedsman and Atkins actually did running up and down to get to those positions to burn off their opponents so they could be that final kick in, because that's what a lot of people don't realise, that it was a real set structure. And it was a hell of a lot of running. Our boys were buggered in that last quarter. But watching, I think it was in the first quarter, towards the end of it, Mackie actually had to go over on his haunches because he was that buggered because of how much we made them run. We break teams.
Chasing us, Nicky.
Yeah. Well, and you watch that last quarter where they did actually start to get some of the ball, because we tired a little bit, so we couldn't pressure them as much as we were previously. They would get free, but their kicking was horrendous because they were tired.
Yeah, well, and everything was under pressure. There was no easy kicks given to them, whereas we were able to work space, stretch them, and then just, slot unpressured kicks and handballs through. So let's look at some individual stats before my voice completely gives up. Roy Laird had a fantastic game, sometimes knocked for previous finals matches, and certainly the pressure was on him in the absence of Brodie Smith, but I thought he played a really good role, Laird. He probably played a little bit more at home than usual, like a little bit deeper down back than usual, and was part of the intercepting brigade down there, but his work by hand and foot was exemplary, and 90.6% disposal efficiency was ridiculous. Yeah.
I think PJ said it was earlier that it was the best disposal efficiency from a 30-plus game possession player in a final.
Doesn't surprise me.
It was outstanding. But my favourite moment was in that first quarter where there was a loose ball. We'd kicked it across the ground. They'd tapped it. 3 Geelong players coming in towards it. Little Lairdy just comes flying in, slides down on his knees, turns whilst he's doing the little slide, gets up and gets the ball out. What I love best is that entire bay directly behind just stood and applauded.
Yeah.
Gave him a standing ovation for that bit of play, because that desperation, he set the tone.
Probably Rory's best final, I would say.
Yes.
And to add to that, I reckon he's got to be the best overhead mark for a guy his size.
Yeah, size. He doesn't care. He goes back. He doesn't care what's coming. He's going to take that ball.
And we were talking about Hearts before, and a couple of times Hartigan really protected Rory as well.
He did. I saw that. He's 100% right.
And that's where, Pikey talks about trusting each other and all the rest of it. That's where that trust comes in, and for Letty to be able to back with some sort of confidence as well as a bit of courage, knowing that he had some cover there, is just what this team's all about. Letty had 20 kicks and 12 handballs for 32. Took 15 marks, if you don't mind. 1 inside 50, 6 rebound 50s, which kind of highlights that he was playing a little deeper than usual. 10 contested posies, went at 90.6, as we said. 5 score involvements. Just the perfect game from Rory Laird. 7 intercepts as well. I wouldn't have had him as our best, but he was certainly our best defender. And under the circumstances, with Brodie being out, we needed him to stand up, and he did.
Correct.
And they'd already said that they were going to put effort into him and try and...
Well, they didn't.
Well,
Did you see any effort? I didn't.
I didn't see it.
Because of the way that the pressure that the ball was coming in, they couldn't... You could kind of see that they were trying to run a defensive player on him, but the way we were pressing their midfield and then the bombs that the ball were coming in, they just couldn't go with him.
The only way that any team is ever going to put us under pressure is to try and isolate players one-on-one. And Lairdy, with his size, can be a bit vulnerable if they get a mismatch one-on-one. But at no stage did they try and isolate Laird or D-Mac or Jake Kelly or anyone like that. They just kicked deep and hoped for the best, and it was completely haphazard. Matty Crouch was probably bog for mine. 15 kicks, 16 handballs for 31, 7 marks, kicked a goal, 5 tackles, 4 inside 50, 6 clearances, went at 77.5%. Gone are the days of Crouchy burning the ball, 16 contested possessions, so he got inside and out.
Kicked a nice goal.
Yeah, 7 score involvement, 6 intercept marks as well. This is what we paid the good money for, the Crouch boys, and they're delivering.
Yeah, Matty is so confident at the moment. He just cruises around the ground, doesn't he?
I quite liked, there was a comment from, I think it might have actually been Dunstall. The Crouch boys are made for September.
Yeah, it was a very good comment because they are. You can hit both the Crouch as hard as you like, but they'll be straight up. And
then the other one's going to come barreling through after you.
Well, the Crouch boys...
And then again at you. They don't stop.
The Crouch boys are exactly what GWS need. They need some players like that. We'll talk about GWS for 5 seconds later. But, speaking of Brad, 17 kicks, 12 handballs for 29 touches, 5 marks, 10 tackles if you don't mind. That's a team high. 5 inside 50s, 8 clearances. What's that? I got 4 frees, Brad Crouch. That's pretty good. It's about time one of our blokes got frees. 17 contested posies, went at 65.5% disposal efficiency, so a little down. But 4 centre clearances and 4 stoppage clearances was pretty good. 7 score involvements. Another step along the path to becoming an A-grade midfielder, Brad Crouch.
Yeah, he was right up there with our very best players. There were some that were saying he was our best player, but I think we have got 3 or 4 players. You could toss a coin when you were trying to work out who's the best player.
I went in my head. It was kind of close between Charlie and Matt, but I put Matt first, Charlie second, and Laddie third. Which, considering the age of those guys, that's awesome.
It is awesome, Nicky.
Well, and it's a good point, Nick, because, the relative ages of the two teams was quite interesting, and we certainly had the younger group, and, we didn't seem to suffer any for it.
Daniels has just made a very good point in the chat that the Silky players tend to go early in the draft. And he said the grunt players tend to fall down the order a bit, hence why we tend to end up with more grunt than silk. Tex was interviewed on Saturday by Triple M in Melbourne, and he actually did, because they asked him about, we don't have any top 10 draft picks, etc. And his comment was, we draft character ahead of talent.
Well, actually, the club is very big on it and has knocked back recruiting, like, say, E.G. Rockler, because they said he doesn't quite suit the character they wanted, and I don't know what it is about Rockcliffe, but certainly the players that we had out there showed plenty of character, and 23, 24 years of age to play the type of games they did, that's outstanding.
Yeah. Just moving on.
Charlie?
Charlie. It was probably second best for mine. It certainly had the biggest impact on the game at key moments. 14 kicks, 5 handballs for 19 posies, 6 marks, including 1 hanger.
Bloody BT. Sorry, he's getting
It was just bloody talk through the whole thing.
Away.
Dickhead.
He destroyed an absolutely brilliant moment. Charlie's eyes, he's just like, he's leaning off the side and he's looking at those blokes going, I can stand on you lot.
Yeah, BT, because I don't know why BT was even there. He'd seemed utterly disinterested in the game, to be honest with you.
He's a prick.
That was so he could catch up with the whole Lever family and drink with them after the game.
It was just shitful commentating. I didn't appreciate it at all. Charlie's kicked 5 goals, one easily his biggest return in any match, let alone a final. But Charlie has got big game form, so that's another feather in his cap.
Yeah, I was going to make that very comment. Cometh the moment, cometh the man, and when the big moment comes, Charlie's there and really firing. And because not necessarily of the greatest number of possessions, but because of the possessions that he got and the way what he did with them, and I had him number 1 because his impact was huge.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you know what the coaches told him to do before the game? go out and have fun.
He did have fun.
Well, interesting you should say that, because the very noticeable thing for mine is it's the happiest that Charlie's looked for about 6 months, I reckon.
Yeah,
but my other favourite moment was he actually looked up on the screen and he was watching his replay and he just did the little He-Man flex.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was just like, somebody's happy with his own work.
Well, apparently he was doing that to Eddie, who was doing it to him on the bench.
Oh, is that what was going on? I loved it. But just on that, he feeds off of Eddie as well. Eddie kind of helps him set the tone. And Eddie in that first quarter, you know, when Eddie's on and he just has that little strut that he does and he kind of tenses his upper body and you can just kind of see there's a look in his eye. Eddie was like that at the start of the game. He was not going to let that chance slip.
No.
Correct.
And, you know, not getting ahead, but let's talk about Eddie. I thought, you know, there's a few players that we identified that needed to have big games, and rightly or wrongly, Eddie was one of them. Charlie was another. Rory Atkins was another. And I felt, you know, Charlie was probably the best of the three, but I felt all of those, and D-Mac, played significant roles. And I feel like that's where we got on top of Geelong, because the second half of our 22 was far stronger and contributed far more than Geelong.
Yep, and that's why I was so confident that we would beat Geelong, in the sense that if you look at our bottom six, what you said is right. When you look at the bottom of your team, not the top, but the bottom, who's got the best bottom, well, you can identify Geelong's bottom six very easily. A lot harder to identify our bottom six because we're very even.
And that's what will win you a grand final.
Correct.
Shane Allen.
Yes.
Rory Sloane, there's really only one stat, and that was the collision to Dangerfield. Everything else that Sloaney did, as good as it was, paled into insignificance when he collided with Patrick, and Patrick did his little Academy Award performance. But it really did. It really did just stop a little bit of momentum that Geelong were building, and I thought it was a pivotal moment.
It was. He had a smother earlier in the ground, and it's such an iconic photograph now of Danger just lying there, spread-eagled on the ground, and that Rory's already looking for the ball and starting to get up. And that epitomises Rory, well and truly.
And, you know, there's, you know, some, I think shitsters are trying to stir it up as a possible reportable offence. I mean, it was just straight at two guys going hard at the ball.
Yeah.
And not stopping and colliding with each other.
Not even worth talking about that, Macca.
Yeah, that was a football collision.
Yeah, and what I liked about it was the fact that what you said, Nicky, about Rory getting up. The reverse held, though, for that bloody great big puff to drama queen laying there.
Oi, don't use that word.
Well, sorry. What, drama?
No,
come on, Macca.
No, I'm sorry. I apologise. Moving on, lying there like a whatever, and he did you actually notice he actually raised his head slightly and looked around and then laid down again?
Oh, it doesn't surprise me.
No,
yeah, he's done that before.
Yeah, he was laying there as if he was dead, and his head just came up about a couple of inches off the ground so he could see up the field a bit, then lay down again. And I thought,
to be fair, I think he was winded, because that was a hell of a hit.
But Nicky,
where he does, let me finish. He does have form, we know, in exaggerating injuries and taking his time on the ground of, I might be dead kind of thing.
When half the football commentary team openly acknowledge that he stays down longer than most, that's like, if I was a footballer, a professional footballer, and I was one of my characteristics was identified as I stay down longer than most, I'd be mortified. You know, it wouldn't matter.
I totally agree with you.
Wouldn't matter how good I was, I'd be mortified if that was the impression that people had of me. And Dangerfield has completely bought into, like, he was always a little bit of that, but he's completely bought into that sense of entitlement I was talking about earlier down at Geelong. And he just and look, we can talk quickly about Paddy's stats. He only had 13 kicks for the match, and he went at 58% disposal efficiency. Like,
At one stage, he was 30-something.
Yeah, I mean, he had a fantastic second quarter, but in the end, that was the only time I really noticed him have an impact on the game. And I don't reckon he's played too many good ones against us, and so clearly the issue is not with us, against Paddy, but the other way around.
Correct. I 100% agree with you. I thought he did have a very good second quarter, but his other three quarters, I mean, very, very ordinary.
Yeah, well, because they started him up forward, they took him away from the contest. They might have got the first little bit of clearance and got it down there, but we got it out of there and took control around the clearance. They wanted to turn it into a contested game. We knew about that. The only problem is we're actually good at that type of game, and we beat them at it.
Oh, well, Paddy can go fishing down at Moggs Creek this week and wander through.
Or surfing in a suit.
Yeah, he'll go wandering down to the empty streets of Geelong saying, I'm the mayor here, or whatever he thinks he is. So, bad luck, Paddy. Oh, by the way, you were wrong, and Jenkins was right.
Yeah, well.
Yeah,
Jenkins did have to back that up. He didn't have a huge game, Jenkins, but did kick 4 goals, and he worked very hard.
Yes,
let me do his stats before you start jumping up and down. 15 kicks for 17 disposals, took 7 marks, kicked 4 goals, couple of hit-outs, played his role. He was never going to be someone that we were going to try and isolate up forward. But he played his role, had 7 score involvements, could have had more if he's just not a reflex player, so he misses some of those handoffs sometimes, and it comes across as selfishness, but I just don't think his brain moves fast enough, to be honest.
There's one shocking one he missed, though.
Yeah, but I think in the end, I think he was caught in 2 minds and probably did the right thing because he didn't want to give it up by half-assing it, Macca.
Because if it's the one you're thinking of towards the cathedral end, Macca?
Yep.
Okay. I've seen a number of people have a go at it going, Eddie was running past and screaming at him. There were 2 Geelong players right next to Eddie. So it wasn't Eddie on his own. Eddie actually had 2 Geelong players following him.
No, but he had players ahead of him too on their own.
No, he didn't. No. They were off to the side and they were manned up. There was nobody free.
No, different incident.
It was on the 50. Is that when he had the shot from the 50?
No, we have to disagree there, Nicky, because there was one there. They called it on the TV as well. It was very obvious that he should have moved it on, but Phoenix is probably right. Too slow a thought process, and by the time it had registered, it had gone.
Yeah, he's not the most instinctive. He's obviously been told, and I think we pointed this out earlier in the season, after he got dropped, that he's been told to assert himself. And he certainly does that by trying to break tackles now and all the rest of it. You know, he's obviously the sort of bloke that does well with only a couple of instructions, but he's not an well, you know, Dave McKay freely admits that he's the same sort of person that needs clarity.
Very clear, very clear structure.
It's not a knock on Jenkins at all. He's not a natural footballer in many respects. And, you know, he's been told to do certain things and he's doing them. So I guess you can't knock that. He'll never be my favourite player. My favourite player. But, you know, I felt he did his job and I felt he's done his job through this final series, and that's really all you can ask.
He has. I don't know. The point made, and you're quite right.
Well, for the other interesting thing is you actually look at our other tall forwards. They didn't have big games either because of the way we played. Because if we were trying to get it to those particular players, that plays into Geelong's defence's hands.
Correct.
So we changed up the way we played up forward. So Tex and Ottens and Jenkins had a very specific role in making sure that their tall backs were always manned up. And they were creating space for our smaller forwards, etc., to operate.
All right, let's move on a little bit. Richie Douglas, I thought, played really well as a secondary midfielder, pinch hitting a little bit around various parts of the ground, up forward a little bit. 14 and 5 marks, 4 tackles, 2 inside 50s, 4 clearances. I just feel like Richie's really settled into a good foil for the Crouch boys and Sloaney.
had a great final series, and he's working very hard, Dougie, but he's getting the opportunities on the ball, and he's resting in other positions on the ground as well. But I think his best work's being done when he's on the ball. So I think he's a natural on baller, and he's loving it at the moment. And I think this has been very close to his best year for the last 3 or 4, hasn't it?
See, I thought his game was kind of quiet, being there and watching the game, because his last game against Geelong was just so outstanding. So he was a bit more quiet, but you can see him, he's doing some nice stuff. And then when I watched the replay, it's like, no, he was actually doing a lot more than what you noticed live at the ground. It was a beautiful, consistent, hard game.
Yeah, not frightened to win the hard ball.
Yeah.
We already spoke about DMAC, but he had 10 and 8. Sorry, guys, I'm starting to crash and burn. I thought our back six, Jakey Lever, Kyle Hartigan, Jake Kelly, Luke Brown, Daniel Talia, DMAC when he was back there, all played really, really well, backed each other up, bottled up the contest, made sure there wasn't too many one-on-one scenarios, and really made it very difficult for Geelong to even think about scoring.
Yeah. They just hassled. I think a great example and contrast us with GWS was one of Lever's instances. So he gets over and he gets the spoil on, and he gets tackled and he's on the ground. The ball spills out, goes a little way away from him, and then heads back to the player that's tackled him. And all of a sudden he's coming inside on to tackle that player, and then he's backed up by Rory and tackle when he gets to holding the ball. So, yes, he's been tackled to the ground. They don't stay there. They get back up because they've got to get back in the contest. And if you watch the GWS Richmond game, GWS defenders, if they end up on the ground, they just lie there and watch. Our boys don't do that. You can't do that in our defence.
And was it young Kelly who was standing Menzel?
For a lot of it,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, and I thought he did an excellent job on him, and to the point that Menzel will probably leave the club next year because he's only been given an insulting offer, which is generally we want to move you on type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think Daniel Menzel looks like he's struggling a little bit. Whether he's got some issues with that knee or whatever, but he's starting to become a bit of a one-trick pony.
Very much so.
He did actually say when he was coming back, he won't be able to play a full season. He has to have rest. He can't do a lot of things of what he used to, just purely because of those couple of knee recons. It's just he physically can't do that anymore. And this has been a long season. They've actually had to play him quite a bit because they don't have a lot of forwards that kick goals.
Yeah, and Talia made an absolute mess of Hawkins.
Oh, Hawkins wasn't even in the game.
He always does.
I mean, I don't even know how they were trying to play Hawkins.
Like Walker.
At sometimes he was that high lead up, but he wasn't presenting as nearly as well as a Tex or a Lynch. And they never tried to isolate him one out deep. I don't know why they bother having him in the team if they're not going to actually use him appropriately.
Well, they've tried to actually, the past couple of weeks, they've tried to change the way he plays. They've tried to get him out of that forward 50 and make him the big lead-up forward. Very like Walker. He doesn't know how to play it. He's not smart enough. Actually,
you've stolen my next line to go. I don't think he's got a massive IQ. I think he's very slow to learn, and to me, it looks like he's bloody lost out there.
Well, I don't think, and I think the whole campaign by Geelong smacks of desperation because you don't change your game style 3 games out before finals. You don't play your best midfielder up forward in a preliminary final where you need to win contested posse early. You don't play a bloke like Joel Selwood who can hardly run, even though Selwood was probably their best player.
He was, yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of desperate decisions made by Chris Scott and the Geelong Cats throughout the final series. And it smacks of a team, again, without wandering into Tuesday Night Live territory, it smacks of a team, I think, that was their last chance for a while, I think, Geelong. I don't think they're going to get another chance for a little while.
I know they...
No, Greg.
But I'm with you, but they think that if they get Ablett back, they're still a chance to do it. And I don't think so. They don't. It comes back to this overall strength in the bottom 6 and the bottom 8, whatever you want to call it. They're not good enough, and that's where you rise or fall. If you've got weaknesses, good teams exploit it.
Yeah, it's just like you said before, Phoenix. The contrast was so obvious, and then watching the game the following night, night, and I'm just going, both of these teams are nervous as all hell, and I can't tell what their structure is. It was really hard to try and figure out a clear set structure, but I can tell what ours is. It's just so obvious what it is. This is why I'm quite confident most games this year going to watch our team play, because it was like Hawthorn. You knew how Hawthorn played. They didn't change it too much. That's how they played, but you couldn't stop them. And I kind of get that feeling very much with our team this year.
Nicky, I hate to say it, but so do I.
No, lid's still on for feeling. 9.
Oh yeah, I'm confident, but we have to turn up to play. And it's going to be an unknown because none of our players have ever been to a grand final.
Yeah, but neither of them.
Neither of them, Nicky.
And you don't know which team's going to turn up. But if we turn up to play with the intent like we did, and we did the stance again, it looked so awesome. And they actually kept the camera on us. And did you guys notice what happened when Geelong broke?
Yes.
Tex.
Move forward.
Move forward, Adam. Just 2 steps, and then he turned.
No,
it's like, I'm coming after you.
You know what I can't understand is the media don't seem to have got it, what this is all about. They've
started to.
Oh, I haven't heard anybody say it properly, Nicky. It's very clear what we're about. We're about focusing our minds on going 100% at the opposition. And it's not about being Harker and War and all the rest of it. It's about getting all of our players into the same mode, into the same mindset, and that's how we're playing.
It was so where it's actually born out of. It is actually born out of the Harker a little bit, though.
Yeah, I know where it came from. Yeah, you're
because
quite right.
We actually had, and I can't remember his name, but he's like one of the he's Sir something.
New Zealand rugby man. Yeah.
Yeah, he came in and talked about it, and it's the stance they do before the Harker. That's what it's come out of. And yes, it is. It's that focus, as you said. They did talk about it on the Sunday Footy show on Channel 9, that it is actually more about it. But they had Andrew Fagan on later. So I think he kind of let them know, no, it's about focusing ourselves and getting ourselves prepared. And I loved him actually make the statement. It'd be so nice to see 50,000 people do that too.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that I've always thought when I've watched grand finals or any game that's where they play the national anthem before the game, that in some ways it's unfair to the players to have this focus about the national anthem rather than the game they're playing on. And yet Adelaide seems to have solved that problem by getting their players to stand and show the appropriate body respect for the anthem by standing still, etc., but focusing on the game, and which is exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just love that little move of Tex was so very telling.
I thought it was ever to say we've got them.
Yeah, and the fact that they did know that we won't move until the opposition team does, and they're like, so what are they going to do? Are they just going to have a stare off if the other team refuse to move? It's like the other team are going to move because in their mindset. And I think it was, I can't scroll back down, I think it was PJ who actually did mention it, that you could see that Geelong were trying to ignore it, which meant they'd thought about it because they're trying to, we're not bothered by this. Yeah, you actually are because you're looking away from it, etc. So a couple of you are trying to step back.
To it.
Yeah, you're reacting to it.
Regardless, they're reacting to it in some way. Anyway, I think we're all agreed. I think we're all agreed that it's for our own mental mindset, and what happens with the other team is really incidental.
Correct.
All right, well, let's wrap things up because we've hit the hour mark, and my throat has just about hit its use by.
But one thing we haven't mentioned is the best players for Geelong. I thought Schmidt. Was probably Schmidt, the umpire. I thought he was the best player for Geelong.
Cam Mooney had a go at him. He actually had a go at him on the bounce for his Schmitty bounces because they were pathetic. And he goes, "You just cost yourself a grand final."
23 free kicks to 17, although that's them getting 23.
Yep. So the frees in their forward line, pretty much all paid by him. 8
to them in their forward line, 3 in our forward line. So, and Schmidt paid mainly all those ones. We paid probably about 6 of those 8. So, I thought that was worthy of a mention. That I'm not saying they're cheating, but by God, they gave a good imitation of it.
I mean, the ones he did pay were there. Some of them were softer. As we talked about, no, a couple of them were there.
Brownie made the point that there were 2 goals they got.
Yeah.
That was
one against Otten was disgusting.
The
deliberate.
Look, you'll never get Brian Taylor to admit it, but some of the other commentators seemed at times to suggest that perhaps Adelaide weren't getting it what they should be getting. I thought honestly that I would say probably worth at least 3 or 4 goals to Geelong.
I wouldn't go.
No, I think there was 6. But you know what?
Who cares about the freaking umpires?
We won by 10.
Yeah,
I'm allowed to hate.
Yeah, I know, but winners are grinners, mate. Just quickly, Richmond, obviously our grand final opponents, beating GWS 103 to 67. Nikki's just dropped a revelation on our internal chat here, and
you will leave it there.
Just completely bloody thrown me. But anyway, in the end, I felt like GWS had their chances and just were wasteful. And I get the impression when I watch GWS that they don't play the percentages. They're always trying for the specky pass or and that's laziness. It shows a lack of concentration in my view.
It's as we've talked about before, it's relying on their talent. They've never had to work hard. They're not like Matt Crouch. They haven't had to work hard to get something they want.
Correct, Nikki. They're absolutely laden with talent, and I mean they got drafted at most of those players out there were drafted very, very high indeed, and that was because they have talent, but they haven't been educated to do the nasty, dirty stuff that you have to do at AFL to survive and to get the ball. Green's a very good example of what the rest of the team should be.
Yeah, and I thought Tom Scully played particularly well.
Callum Ward too. He's developed, hasn't he?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with his game. Callum Ward, I thought, played all right too. But they just when they're transitioning, when they're transitioning the ball, they don't play the percentages. They're more focused on pulling off the fantastic play rather than making sure they retain possession. And how many times did they turn over and get burnt as a consequence?
Yeah, they did. They do try to do the impossible because they think they're that bloody good. But the interesting thing is the players that that you mentioned there about Scully and about Ward, they both came. Scully and Ward. They come from other clubs, and they've had to learn how to fight and work hard to get the ball, etc. So apart from throwing Green, and of course. They've got a couple of other players that do play very well. They've got a lot of players that to us, they look like they're cruising.
Yeah, they're missing a couple more hard nuts, and I don't know whether Leon Cameron is the right guy because
no, he's not.
I feel like he's bought into that whole playing like millionaires approach, and what he hasn't been able to instill in them all this time is discipline. I feel like their tools are shit. John Patton is useless. Lobb is useless. Their one good forward, Cameron, is out, but even he's a little bit soft at the contest.
And Himmelberg, actually, Harrison Himmelberg is good, but they play him. but they play him as a defensive forward.
Yeah.
So he's the one that will chase. So you can see why we were very interested in him.
Yeah, he's going to be a very good player.
I'm so happy we've got Elliot. Because it might be, hey, Harrison, do you want to come play with your brother?
Yeah, Himmelberg and also Nick Hayes down back for them. I really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good.
And Patton is, for all his talent, he's an incredibly dumb footballer. He's like Hawkins.
Yes.
He dominated at the junior level because he was so much bigger. And once you actually put him up against players who were close to the same size as him and have the same ability, he struggles because he actually has to think about what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make good decisions.
No, he hasn't got a football brain. Is my impression. He doesn't use his body well. He relies on his physical attributes, which,
and he's got a massive body on him.
Yeah, I know.
Jenkins uses his body more.
But at an AFL, at an AFL level, Macca, the gap between his body size and others is not great enough for him just to be able to rely on it.
Correct.
All right, so we've obviously got some contentious things coming up during the week. There's been some whinging about Sloaney, but I think we all agree, as does most people, that will get let through to the keeper without a drama. Same with...
There's a talk, there's the MRP, which is going to meet, they're going to meet at 9am, or we'll actually know 9am tomorrow.
No, meeting at 9.
Meeting at 9, so we'll actually find out early what is going on. They said, was it 7 instances involving Adelaide and Richmond players that need to be looked at? So there's 2 for Cochin. There's 1 for Ellis. So there's 3. You've got Sloane is 4. There's a Tex one, fend off, which is on the chest, and it does slip up a little bit. So that would be fine.
Selwood probably a jumper punch.
There's Selwood jumper punch to Tex, but there is also... in the very first quarter, Selwood and Knights have a bit of a tangle. There's punches going back and forth, and you can actually see that Knights does a little whack to the body.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I reckon that's one of them that they're also looking at.
Probably going to find. Anyway, I don't think we lose anyone. And what do we think about? What do we think about Cochin?
I'm going to say to you,
they will work very, very
hard.
I'm
the host, Macca, so I ask you.
All right, ask us.
I just bloody did.
Yeah, and he can't talk, Macca. On that, I think if it was in regular season, he would get a fine for it because he did hit him in the head, and that's the way the AFL's going. The head is sacrosanct. I do agree with you, as you've said, actually, on Big Footy, where he was actually trying to get to the ball, but he does tuck the arm into brace, which you're going to have to do in that. It's exactly the same as the McKay incident, which there was no case to answer for in our game against GWS. I think that will be exactly the same kind of result for Cochin. They will have to, it'll be adjudicated in such a way that it was just a football collision, so that he gets off, because...
I hope so.
Yeah, because...
It would be shitful if Cochin missed out for that.
It would be shitful, but Shields did miss the rest of the game. There is conjunction as to whether it was that hit or the later one that Asprey got him. Oh, that'll be the other one that'll be looked at. So there's 4 actually for Richmond. As to which one actually caused the concussion, it might have actually been both in combination that did it.
I'm going to use the last bit of my voice to make this comment. And sorry, Jason, but it's because of your comment on the chat. I don't give a flying rat's ass whether Shield could play for the rest of the game or not. Shit happens on a football field. And have we all gone so soft that now it has to be this like-for-like situation? You know,
No.
Shield could have done a bloody hamstring and not played for the rest of the game. So he copped an accidental whack to the head, which may have contributed or may have been the cause of him not being able to play for the rest of the game. It wasn't an intentional hit to the head. It wasn't premeditated. It was Cochin going hard for the ball. And, you know, it's not Aussie rules anymore if Trent Cochin misses the final.
But Phoenix, it hasn't been on Aussie rules all season because because that's what the match review panel. So that's where we're coming from when we're saying that. But because Shield missed, because that's how they've judged it for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
They will change it back to how it should be for this particular incidence.
Yeah, look, and I'm not having a crack at you guys or Jason on the chat for that matter.
You're having a chat at a go at the AFL.
I'm just having a go at people's attitudes. Like, there's a lot of people that aren't being as objective as you guys in saying, well, that's how it's been adjudicated. There's a lot of people just saying, oh, it's a dirty act and blah, blah, blah. Bullshit, he was going for the ball,
He was.
And
Definitely
yes, the rules are stuffed. And if it causes Conscience to miss a grand final, then hopefully that's the... I'd rather beat Richmond with a full deck, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other thing is, I saw Adrian Anderson on TV. You remember him, the Demetrius offsider, who invented this whole system in the first place. And he was saying that when the system was invented, the one that he put in place, he said it was always about what the intention was, not the result. He said it has deteriorated somewhat to the result, but it should be on the intention, and on the intention, Conscience should not get suspended.
And that's what it has to be. Like, we're playing a contact sport, so you don't want people to get whacked off the ball. You don't want people to be throwing punches or elbows or anything like that. But you have to accept and appreciate that part of the game is body contact. And part of body contact, particularly in a fast physical game like ours, is accidental and incidental head-high contact. It's simple as that. Hopefully, eventually, and hopefully this situation maybe makes a few people see sense.
Ellis is the one that's more likely, I think. I thought his was an intentional one.
Yeah, because he did the tuck in. The thing is that he actually landed and possibly broke some bones in his wrist or in his hand. He did finish playing the game, so it could be that. I mean, if he does play, we should be very aware that he's got an issue with that hand and exploit it.
Yeah, I saw that.
I reckon Dusty's got some rib issues, so that'll affect his breathing.
Well, Dusty only got 20 touches on the weekend, and yes, he played well in patches, but...
And the entire last quarter, he played forward. He did not go in the midfield.
Yeah.
That told you he was injured, because the game was still in the balance.
Yeah, I think they've got a couple that might be struggling a little bit. So, but anyway, again, without jumping into other shows' territory, my view after watching the GWS Richmond game was simply that neither of those sides scared me at all.
That's what Nick and I both say. That the interesting thing is, though, Richmond play a very unique, different style of game, probably forced on them by the nature of the player that they've got. And it's held up so far in the finals. I don't think it's going to hold up against us the way that we play our defence.
Hardwick actually admitted in the presser afterwards that they had to change the way they played after the round 6 game against us, and they looked at what we did, and that's what they've worked on.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting. We'll have something to talk about Tuesday then.
Yeah.
And shall we just finish up with, oh my God, we're in the grand final.
We are in the grand final, and it'll be a very good dessert to the main event, which was Sturt winning the grand final today, obviously. Hang on a moment. Just for old time's sake.
Enjoy it. You guys deserved it.
We did deserve it, and if you read some of the tears on the port board, we did it for all of you.
They got what they deserved.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's me done. So, unfortunately, that's this rap show done as well. Sorry that it's been a little bit low-key, but you got about as much as you could get from me tonight, and we'll be back on Tuesday night for Tuesday Night Live, our special grand final week Tuesday Night Live, which should be a belter. And then, obviously, Scorpus and I on Thursday night with the all-important teams. Can't see any changes for us. Huey Greenwood may be the only question mark. I think he might be carrying a little hand injury, and he certainly was a bit fumbly, so that'll be one to watch, but I think everyone else is pretty right. Yeah,
I think we'll be unchanged. Greenwood was disappointing on the weekend, but everybody has a bad one now and then.
And well done, Phoenix, for absolutely struggling through with the flu.
Oh, yes, soldiering
Absolute
on.
credit. I know what that's like because I had it earlier. It's a shit flu.
I just
better.
couldn't pass it up. It was like we win a prelim and get into a grand final, plus Sturt win the grand final. I was like, I can't lie on the couch for this. And let Peter J bloody whip through it in 35 minutes.
I know. He's annoying like that.
Try to steal your show, he did, Phoenix.
Yeah, I know, right? No, I had backup and it was much appreciated from both Peter and Scorpus. But anyway, we got through it. All right, so we will see you on Tuesday night. In the interim, you can like us on Twitter and Facebook at AFL Crowcast. Give us a rating and a nice little write-up on iTunes if that's how you're listening to us. And we will see you on Tuesday night. Thanks, guys.
Night all.
Yeah, good night all.
Thanks, everyone on chat too. We'll see you Tuesday night.
That will do.